Thanks very much, Carl. Is this working? Is that working now?
Isn't it wonderful how technology, yeah, there it goes. I hope this part of the technology works. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Barry and Barbara. It's wonderful to be here today, and you know what would never happen in a classroom is that very obedient shift of people to where you wanted them to go. We constantly are reminded in classrooms that the greater distance from that authority figure at the front, the better off everyone is. Snooze time at the back, and people at the front are those who are really keen. In any event, I am delighted to be here with you today. The environment is of great importance, and for me, it's been a passion throughout my life. I started my career with the Berger Commissions. Those of you with as much gray hair as I have will recognize that as being the inquiry into the desirability of putting a pipeline down the Mackenzie Valley to bring oil and gas reserves from the very high Arctic, the Beaufort Sea area, down to markets in southern Canada and the US. And it was a landmark decision by Pierre Trudeau and his cabinet to not move forward with that particular initiative. And many of you will be aware that that has been resurrected recently. Exxon and various other companies are very interested in moving it forward. And I think our Aboriginal peoples are now more able to engage, and certainly we have a far greater understanding of environmental issues. And so the delay was probably most appropriate, and there's no question we do need energy. So we'll see what happens with that. I thought it would be rather arrogant to come in and talk to you about environmental issues in your own backyard. I'm a newcomer here, pardon me. And so what I thought I would do is to first recognize what you're talking about today: air quality, greenhouse gases, fossil fuels, water resources, education and awareness, and the local Environmental Action Fund. I think these are all great initiatives, but what I wanted to do was to begin with a story from far away that I'm very familiar with, and that has, I believe, quite a few lessons. There are many complex issues involved in that particular story, and issues that I think underscore the both complexity and the cascading kinds of interconnections that are involved in so many environmental issues. Here is the nature of the story. I wonder if I can, is Colleen here? I wonder how to turn these lights down a little bit. Thanks, Barry. No, I won't try. I don't know how well you can see that. That is a photograph of a landscape in central British Columbia. Oh, thanks, Barry. There, that's... Is there any way of getting these front lights off? I think that's... Can you see that reasonably well? Okay. That's a landscape in northern British Columbia with lovely green forest in the background, a pristine lake. I used to love fishing in those lakes. And in the foreground, a forest of lodgepole pine that is clearly under very considerable duress. And here's the reason why. That small black beetle is the adult form of a bark beetle, a mountain pine beetle. And those white larvae on the left, you can see two of them, are the larval form. And the larval form of bark beetles lives under the bark. It eats the phloem tissue, the water-carrying tissues just under the bark of trees. And that pine beetle is about the size of a grain of rice, and the larvae are of roughly comparable size, and the larvae, while they're chewing away on the phloem tissue, create those galleries that you see, galleries of activity roots where they're feeding. This shows an adult just about ready to fly. So when it flies, it disperses. They are absolutely poor navigators. In terms of flight capacity, it's really marginal. And you can see that. The wings are very undeveloped. I'll come back to that in a few moments. This is an organism that really has had a history of being fairly local, fairly regional, and a very long history, of course, as an organism that has exploited the forest trees in Western Canada. This is a lodgepole pine tree that has been under attack by a mass attack by pine beetles, and what you see at the base of that tree is a great deal of sawdust and what is called frass. The frass is actually the excrement and the other byproducts of the beetle itself. And in many forest regions, on a nice, warm, dry, cool, and still evening, you can sit in the forest and you can actually hear those larvae going chewing through the phloem. It's quite remarkable. The density of larvae in trees was unprecedented recently. And this shows the effect of many larvae in the sub-bark layer of a lodgepole pine tree. You can actually see a few of the larvae down at the bottom of that photograph. The little white kernels of rice is what they look like. Now, the mortality that the pine beetle causes is not due to the pine beetle, in fact. So these galleries are formed in severe cases. These galleries, they can girdle the tree, and then water connectivity is lost, and the tree will die. However, the much greater impact of pine beetles is because they carry a fungus. Much like Dutch elm disease, the fungus that's carried by this beetle occludes the pit connections between cells, so cells in plants have small connections between them, and water is drawn up through the tree, in this case, by evapotranspiration at the top of the tree from the canopy, from the needles. Water evaporates, and because of the surface tension of water, it draws water all the way up from the roots. It's a lovely mechanism, one of nature's wonders, I think. The fungus that's associated with this beetle plugs up the connections between cells, and that's what causes pine trees to die. This shows a map of central British Columbia, and the year is 2001. Pardon me. The intensity of color, the deeper the red, the more pine trees are actually it's beetle density that is shown here. The deeper the color, the greater the density of beetles. You'll notice in the left central part of that photo, there are a couple of very dark, almost blood red blotches, and with a gray, lighter gray area in between. The light gray area represents what is called an overrun situation. The forest is completely overrun by pine beetles. And that lightish gray area where it's overrun is situated in the middle of Tweedsmuir Park. Those of you who are familiar with parks in BC will recognize Tweedsmuir as being the park that is in the center of what is a fabulously large reservoir. I wish I had a laser pointer here, but a chain of lakes that were formerly separated have been connected through the construction of a dam, and water that used to flow into the Fraser River through the Nechako is now diverted straight into the Pacific Ocean. The hole was drilled through a mountain to generate electricity for Alcan in the